So I am on a mission to help real estate teams make better hiring decisions and grow world-class teams. This mission has formed the focus of literally my entire career. And it's a mission that I found myself on almost completely by accident. When I graduated from college, I worked for a real estate business coaching company in Los Angeles. It's funny how things come full circle, right? And part of my job was to help our coaches create training programs for real estate assistants and real estate teams. And as part of that, we tracked our agents' production, and what we found is that when an agent hired a fantastic assistant, their business could double or triple over the next 1 to 2 years. Now, I know that is probably not news to anyone in this room, but as a fresh business school graduate, the idea that one key hire could make that kind of impact on someone's business just like completely blew my mind. But the problem was, some of our agents hired great assistants and saw their business double and triple, but many of our clients struggled to hire, and their turnover would cause stagnation in their business. So I started helping our clients hire assistants. Now, I was about 25 at the time, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was literally making it up as I went along. But over time, I created a really good system for identifying talent and screening them for these real estate administrative roles. The problem is, finding talent is one thing, matching them to the right job is something else. And it was frustrating to see talented, successful assistants and well-meaning agents not work out. And I wanted to figure out what was going on. So I went back to the drawing board, and I really looked at what happened when a healthy, normal group of people, so we're not talking about a hostile work environment or an assistant with behavioral issues, when normal, healthy people can't make a go of it, what the heck went wrong? Well, what I found was that it could be traced back to a misalignment in fit in one of these 5 areas, one or more of these 5 areas. So I created some best practices to help me screen for fit during the interview process, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Today I'm going to give you 4 specific strategies that you can use in your hiring process to help you screen for fit and help you ensure longer lasting hires. So screening for fit in all of these areas doesn't matter if you're not attracting the right people to your job in the first place. So screening for fit is essential. And screening for fit really comes down to identifying who you are, what you're about, and then shouting it from the rooftops and attracting those people to your job. Is anybody here also a fan of Simon Sinek? Am I the only one? We have any? Yay, woohoo! Okay, so Simon Sinek wrote a book called Start With Why. And the premise of his book, the premise of his work essentially, is that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, and what you do simply proves what you believe. So let that sink in for just a second. That concept, the idea that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, is also true in recruiting. Candidates are looking for purpose and meaning in their work, and they want to work for somebody whose values align with theirs. And so this is essential as you go through your search process. My mission, like I said, is to help real estate agents grow world-class teams. That's my business mission. My personal mission is to do that while building a company that allows me to live a life in balance. I work remotely from Spain. I have a 3-year-old. I have a lot going on in my life other than work, and my company supports my lifestyle and fits around it, and that's by design. That mission of mine also aligns with my values. My values include things like collaboration and teamwork, constant improvement, flexibility, balance, and travel. And those are the same values that are reflected with the people who work with me. So I'd like you to go to your workbook. We're going to go through some exercises today to prepare you for your next hire. So if you go into your workbook, go to page 20. What's your mission? Why do you do what you do? It's not just to make money. It's not just to be the #1 in your market. There's more to it than that, and you may not have time to get all the way into that right now. But why do you do what you do? The people who work for you want to know, and they want to know what your values are. And of course, your values are reflected in the values of your company, because your company is an extension of you. And then finally, What is your culture? What is it like to work for you? If you were talking to your ideal candidate and you were trying to convince them to go into their boss's office and quit their job and come and work for you, how would you describe what it's like to work in your office? And one of the things that I love about working with real estate agents is that you guys all do the same thing, and every single one of you does it differently. And I can have 5 agents in the same market looking for essentially the same thing, and they will all be attracted and they will all attract a different hire. I'll give you a really great story about this. So about 2 years ago, we had a client call us, and we were on our launch call. Our launch call is our deep dive, get to know you conversation. And she said, I'm really sarcastic. It's politically incorrect around here, and I need someone who can hang with that. It's a rough and tumble environment. And we said, okay, we've been there, we can do that. And then she goes, and if they can't quote Seinfeld, they can't work here. I swear, Sarah can attest to it. And I said, excuse me, what? She's like, if they can't quote Seinfeld, as in the TV show, they can't work here. And she was completely serious. Like, well, that's a first, but okay. So we put in her job ad, we put 2 Seinfeld quotes, and we said, if you don't know who said this, this is not the right job for you. And we put it out there, and we said, well, let's see what happens. You guys, people went nuts. I was shocked. People could not get over. They were so excited about working for a highly sarcastic, politically incorrect, Seinfeld-loving agent. So you guys, if that woman can find her tribe, so can you. And the more specific you are, the more clear you are about who you are and what you stand for and why you do what you do, the easier it is to attract those people to your job. Once you've figured out those kind of big questions, right? Those are not simple 2-second answers. But once you've figured that out, then you can start working on finding the ideal candidate for the role you need to fill. So on the next page of your workbook, I've asked you to write down the job title for the next position you think you'll need to fill. Maybe you're expanding your team. Maybe there's someone you might have to replace. Maybe if something terrible happened and this one person on your team left, that would be the really hard role to fill. Think about that position. Does everybody have one in mind? Now, I want you to envision who the ideal candidate is for that role. And I'm not talking about skills and experience. I'm talking about the human being, the person who is going to align with you and your culture and your vision and your mission. About a year ago, a client reached out to us. She lives in the East Bay of San Francisco. Her name is Carrie, and she's really alternative. I mean, she dresses in 1950s style clothing, jet black hair, and her clients are really eclectic. And it was important to her that we found somebody who was comfortable in her world. And this was sort of central to who we needed to find for this role. And so when we wrote her job ad, this is how we described her ideal candidate. We said, they're highly systematic in their approach. They seek growth. They are accepting of people who are different from them. This person has a great sense of humor and an eclectic personality. They have a direct communication style. They take direction well, but they are a leader in their role. Now, can you see how from a candidate's perspective, how much more powerful and connecting that is versus a long list of required qualities and traits? Because trust me, no candidate has ever read, must be a good communicator, and said, no, that's not me, I won't apply to this job. It doesn't work that way. So instead of trying to eliminate people with your job ad, you need to motivate those people who may be casually looking. And that's the next thing you need to keep in mind. Most of the candidates you want to hire are currently employed and they're only casually looking, which means they're only bothering to apply to the very best jobs. And candidates leave jobs for one of 3 reasons. They either don't like their boss, they don't like their working conditions, or they seek growth and they can't get that in their job. And then money is secondary to that. So you also have to know why your job is awesome. Like, why should somebody love your job? And this is going to be different depending on the job in your office and your unique culture. But I've had clients get on our launch call and describe their position like this. Well, they're going to be in the office all day. It's a lot of paperwork. I mean, it's a lot of paperwork. It's monotonous. There's not a lot of people interaction. And there's probably a lot of overtime. Now, if you were a candidate sitting across from that agent, would you take that job? Oh, hell no, right? And you have to change your mindset. Assuming that you are paying a fair wage and you're a decent human being, there's a person out there who's really excited about that job. So get excited about that opportunity because you're looking for someone who's going to join you on your mission, okay? So if you can do this, if you can speak to your ideal candidate and you're really clear about who you are and what you want and where you're going, then you can attract the right people to your job, and every other step in this process gets a lot easier. How many people use the DISC in their hiring process? All right, has everyone taken the DISC? Do we all know what our DISC profiles are? Okay, great. So I've been using the DISC for about 10 years in my process, and I have just tested thousands upon thousands of candidates. It's not perfect, but what I like about the DISC is it gives us a quick and simple way to predict how someone is likely to behave on the job. So let's just quickly review what the DISC is. So high Ds, does anyone want to shout out what a high D trait is for our high Ds? Direct, there we go. What else? Takes risk. Bottom line oriented, get to the point, competitive, leader, great. What about I's? High I traits? Social. Fun. Yeah. What else? Talkative, maybe emotional. Yep, great. Okay, what about S? Do we have any high S's in the room? Okay, what are high S traits? Nurture. Assistance. Yeah, caretakers. Systems. Yep, systems. Okay. And then C's. Why do we like C's? Details, right? Yeah, details, systems, cautious. These are the people who dot their I's and cross their T's. Yeah. Okay, so if you were looking for a real estate executive assistant for your office and someone had this graph, would you be excited about them? High SC, low I, mid-level D? Yeah, so this is pretty much the holy grail of real estate assistant profiles. If I could have a zillion of these, that'd be great. So when we look at this profile, what we see is probably someone who is a natural caretaker, a good listener, they're systematic in their approach, they care about the details. That low I would indicate that they're probably more of an introvert. They don't need to be around a lot of people, and they tend to be more of a logical decision maker. And finally, that mid-level D, it's enough oomph to push things forward and have a good sense of urgency, but they don't have to be in charge. Is it possible to have too much of a good thing? Yeah. Okay, so when graphs get really extreme like this, we can predict that somebody will be very resistant to change. Very high C's must be right. They need to be right. You know how annoying that is to have an assistant who needs to be right all the time? And that very, very low D indicates someone who's passive. And when you have a low D and a high C, that person would probably move very slowly. So that's how we would read this graph, right? They're cautious and they have to get everything right. That would drive you guys crazy. Okay, but here's the thing about these graphs. And again, I love the DISC. I've been using it forever. This is my most recent Intermetrics DISC, and I'm the worst assistant you've never hired. Hands down, you do not want me to be your assistant for a couple reasons, but the big one is that I hate following systems. It is so hard for me. I can follow a checklist a couple of times, and by the third time, I'm trying to change it up, man. I just got to do something different. Am I the only one? Is there anyone else that's got to change? Okay. So I am saved from myself by, oops, wrong way, my assistant, Liza. This is my assistant, Liza's graph. She's the best assistant who has ever graced the planet, and she's amazing. She's definitely a high SC and a low D, but she is fast and accurate, and she is not this extreme. So if we can't trust the results of these graphs, then what's the point? There's a couple things. I used these graphs as an illustration, but this is not the DISC test we use. These are from the Intermetrics DISC. This is the one that you can get for free on the Tony Robbins website, and wisehire.com uses it as well. It's called DISC Plus or Intermetrics. It is the most inaccurate of the DISCs in our opinion. So I use this for illustration, but we use a DISC called People Keys. So peoplekeys.com is where you can order their DISCs. We also sell it on our website for just a couple bucks cheaper. But we find that it's a more accurate DISC. So that's the first thing, you got to use the right DISC. But second of all, the DISC prompts you to ask questions you didn't think you needed to ask. So in Liza's case, if I saw this when I interviewed her 4 years ago, I would think to ask questions like, did your last boss ever tell you you needed to work faster? How did that make you feel? If I gave you a project and I didn't give you all of the details and I told you to just figure it out, how would that make you feel? What would you do? A low D and a high C would hate that. That's not their thing at all. So that's the beauty of the DISC. So what I'd like you to do is go back to your workbook and think about the role that you need to fill next and write down the ideal DISC score for that role. And if anybody isn't sure about what that would be for the role they need to fill, raise their hand. We can do a couple examples. Does everybody kind of know what DISC they'd want? Okay. So then the next thing is, I'd like you to come up with some behavioral style interview questions that you could ask to verify that somebody has the DISC score that you are looking for. So is anybody looking for somebody with a high C? Any high Cs? Okay. So does anybody want to take a guess at what are some behavioral style interview questions you could ask to validate a high C score? Does anybody want to take a jab at that? So I'd ask questions like, have you ever made a mistake in a marketing piece that went out? What happened? How do you feel about it? What did you learn? Right? What kind of feedback did your last boss give you about your level of attention to detail? I would dig into questions like that. And the beautiful thing about these DISC profiles is that they give you a full a full page description. So you can go through each sentence in the description and ask, does that sound true for you? Give me an example of a time that that happened. And you can have a conversation. The purpose of the DISC is to have a conversation. It's not to just look at the score and say, okay, that's who the person is. They're good, they're bad, move on. It's a tool to dig deeper and learn about a candidate. And the purpose of this is to ask behavioral style validating questions. So as much as I love the DISC, it can be used to your detriment. And one of the biggest mistakes I see agents make is using the DISC as a disqualifier up front. Now I know this makes it a lot easier if you can just eliminate all of the high DIs. If you're looking for an assistant and you're looking for SCs, that makes it easier, but it's really to your detriment. Because what happens is if you have their DISC score up front when you go into your first interview with a candidate, you've already made assumptions about them, for good or bad. I mean, I could completely sell you on why I'd be a great assistant for you. And if you didn't ask me questions about systems, I'd totally slip in under the radar and you'd hire me and then you'd be really disappointed, right? So if you've already made an assumption about somebody based on their score, it changes the way you have a conversation with them. So what we do is we have candidates take the DISC after we've done a phone interview and a recorded video interview with them. So we've met with them eyeball to eyeball for about 20 minutes. We've formed an opinion about them. And then at that point, if we like them for our client, we'll have them take the DISC. And this way, we use the DISC to either validate what we believe to be true or challenge our assumptions. And that's a much more effective way to use this assessment or any other assessment that you might prefer over the DISC. The next mistake is adhering to a very narrow DISC profile that you believe you must have. A few years ago, it became in vogue. Everybody wanted a high DC assistant. They wanted somebody who was fast and accurate. Does anybody remember this? Did anybody hear, oh, we need to have a high DC assistant? Not this crowd? Okay, good. Well, good, because I disagree. Basically, high DCs are about 10% of the population, and they're notoriously hard to manage. So they're not a good fit for every team. So my husband and my first boss were both crazy high Cs, or are. I'm still married. My husband's a high DC. These people are competitive, direct, have a high sense of urgency, must be right, must have the systems, have to have their things their way, and they don't have the I and the S to kind of soften it out. So my husband's an executive chef. It's a great profile for an executive chef. It's a great profile for a top-performing coach. But those people shouldn't be managed. They got to do their own thing. So the next thing is believing the DISC 100%. At the end of the day, any of these behavioral assessments should be used at about a 20% factor in your decision-making process. They're never a magic bullet or a crystal ball, but they're a tool that you can lean on to help you further understand a candidate. All right, so we validate skills all the way through our process, right? I mean, that's kind of the main focus of doing an interview. But at some point in your process, you must test what you expect. And over the years, I've tried a lot of different things. We've done homework assignments and online software skill assessments. But at the end of the day, the thing that is the most effective at validating skills is to have someone come into your office and do real-world assignments. And as an extra bonus, when you do it this way, you're able to also check on skill fit again, right? The candidate gets to see what a day in the life would be like. You get to see, are they easily distracted? Do they have good sitability? Are they on their phone all the time? I mean, it's kind of incredible what we see sometimes, right? So testing skills in your office is really essential if you can. Obviously, if you're replacing somebody and it's a confidential search, maybe you'll have to have them come in on a Saturday or in the evening. But assuming that it's possible, I haven't found a better solution to verifying testing what you expect. Before we send off a candidate to our client, and before you, if you were doing this on your own, before you have somebody come into your office to do skill assessments, I highly recommend that you test their writing skills. Man, is this a constant issue, right? So we have candidates write a 3 to 4 paragraph essay responding to their DISC results. We want to know what they agree with and what they disagree with, and we want some vivid examples. We've tested different assignments over the years, and the reason this one works for us is because it gives them the freedom to demonstrate their creativity and professionalism. It's kind of an open-ended assignment, and it's long enough. We used to do 1 or 2, like a paragraph. Most people can proofread a paragraph. Give them a whole page, and it's a whole nother story, right? So a longer assignment makes sense. So in your workbook, I left you space if you want to write down a prompt that is appropriate to the role that you need to fill. Something to think about if you don't want to have them write about their DISC assessment. But once you're sure their writing skills are in alignment with your expectations, the next step is to test their skills. And look, this is different for every client, and what I tell clients to do is look at their job ad and think, okay, so if this person came into my office and they didn't know, if I found out that they didn't know how to do X, Y, and Z, I would be so disappointed. It might be Outlook or writing a contract or you name, whatever those things are that are just, you have to know this before I hire you, those are the things you test on. And whenever possible, I like to come up with multi-step or multi-skill assignments so that you can kind of kill multiple birds with one stone. So this might be, give them your pre-listing checklist and have them handle a certain number of items on the list, or write a contract, or audit a transaction file, whatever is appropriate to the job. So you might want to jot down some assignments that would be appropriate for the role that you need to fill next. As you go through this with your candidates, some things to keep in mind. If they transpose numbers, that's a huge red flag. It does not resolve itself. Same thing with spelling. If they can't spell during their interview, that doesn't suddenly get better. Also, if you give them feedback on their assignments, pay attention to how they receive that feedback. Are they argumentative? Are they defensive? However they respond to you in your interview is the best it's going to get. So if you don't like how they respond to you, it's a huge red flag. And then obviously you're going to look at how they solve problems and how fast they work and how they organize their work as well. Try to keep your assignments under about 2 hours. You don't want to make it a marathon, and you also need to respect your candidate's time. And this is so important. Do not use their work product. Under any reason, I don't care how amazing that property description is that they wrote for you, do not use their work. Because if you do, you have to pay them for it, and the IRS and the Employment Development Department frown on you paying them cash, or as an independent contractor, they don't like that at all. So what they would suggest that you do is if you want to test out an employee and have them, or a candidate, and have them do real work, they want you to hire them, like give them a contract and hire them for the day, and then at the end of the day, if you don't like them, terminate them. Like, who's going to go through that? That's crazy, right? Yeah, it's tough. So at that point, you're just hire them already. You have a 90-day, testing out period anyways, right? And you're writing at-will employment agreements. So don't use their work. And keep things really relevant to the role. I've had clients create these crazy Excel tests, and I've said, so when do you use VLOOKUP in your daily business? And they're like, no, we don't. Just want to know if they could do it. It's disrespectful to the candidate, and it's really a waste of your time. Okay, so we are almost to the end, and this is the final step that most people skip because they've met with a candidate a couple of times, they've tested their skills, and they've called their references, and they're just done with this process. You're ready to get going. But you're not done yet. You need to spend one more hour with your candidate and have an alignment interview. This is your chance to dot your I's and cross your T's and make sure that you guys are completely on the same page. And this is where some things can really go awry. Okay, so it seems kind of funny to have to talk about this late in the interview process because you probably, hopefully on your phone interview asked, can you work these hours? I need you one weekend a month. I need you to be flexible. How's the commute? But sometimes these answers change. And one of the most frustrating misalignments that I see is when the agent thinks flexibility means this and the assistant thinks flexibility means this, and they are not even close. Right? Has anybody experienced this? Yeah, it's really frustrating. So you need to be explicit about, okay, there may be times when you need to stay late without notice. It happens maybe once every 2 weeks. Can you do that? Don't ask, do you have to pick your kids up from school, right? Not to say that, right? I need you to do this. Is that something you can commit to? So think about the role and your expectations and jot down any practical life interview questions that you might need to ask your candidate when you get to this point. Next, this is your chance to talk about your company goals, your big picture, and how they're going to fit into your process. Your candidate wants to know why you're interested in them. They want to know where you're going, and they want to know what steps you're taking because your candidate is interviewing you too. Your savvy, high-level candidates are looking at you and they're trying to figure out, do you know what you're doing? Do you know where you're going? Do I want to get on this train with you? And so the more explicit you can be on what your plan is and how they fit into it, the more comfortable they're going to be going into their boss's office and quitting their current job. In your workbook, I've left you some room to write down some benchmark goals for your candidate. Kathleen Metcalf is going to talk about a similar thing tomorrow, so I won't pause to give you time to kind of go through this now, but at some point, this is something you'll want to do as you're preparing to hire this next person. Again, your candidate wants a roadmap. They want to know how they can be successful with you. And when you tell them, okay, at the 3-month mark, I expect that you are taking ownership of the contract to close process. At 6 months, I expect that you've done this. Then they know exactly what to do, and they are so happy. That's exactly what every assistant wants. Tell me exactly what you expect of me, and then let me go do it. I also encourage my clients to really dig into their candidates' goals. And again, you probably asked, what are your 3 to 5 year goals at the beginning of your interview process? But they didn't know about you and the job and the opportunity, and they've had a little bit more time to digest things, and sometimes their answer changes. More than once, I've had candidates who at the top of their interview process said, I'm looking for a long-term admin job. They get to this point and they're like, yeah, this real estate thing seems great. I'm gonna get my license. I'd love to start selling in about 6 months. And you're like, whoa, hold on, that wasn't in the plan, right? You also want to know what their financial goals are, and can you meet them? And so you can talk about, okay, I understand you're trying to save for a house. Well, if we can hit this goal and you get this bonus, then I can help you get there. And then if you know their personal goals, you can help them on their mission too, on their life journey. And isn't that one of the privileges of being a leader of an organization, that you get to support other people as they rise up while they help you, right? Okay, so I know I'm not the first person to tell you that you must have an expectations conversation before you hire, right? How many people always sit down and go over standards and expectations when they hire? This is why I'm talking about it, even though you've already been told this. Okay, so even though it seems really obvious that on time means on time, or I expect that you answer your phone when I call you, or whatever your things are, unless you are explicit about what they are, and better yet, you give them to your candidate in writing, they can't be expected to rise to your standards and your expectations. And when you've had this expectations conversation, and then they don't meet your expectations, it gets a lot easier, right? If you could say, do you remember when we sat down and I said, I expect that you're at your desk working exactly at 9 a.m., and you agree that that's a standard that you could live up to? Okay, well, you're not meeting that expectation. What's going on? That's better than saying, hey, I never told you how important it was that you're here on time, but you haven't been here on time, and now I'm really upset with you, right? It's a totally different conversation. And here's the thing, this is a two-way street. Every candidate has had a terrible boss, and they have baggage. And you want to know what their expectations are of you so that you can meet them as well. They might have had an agent who never made it to their appointments on time, made it to the appointments the assistant set with the agent on time. And they were really bothered by that. Or they had a boss who yelled at them across the room, and that made them feel really uncomfortable. Wouldn't you like to know those things so that you don't repeat that pattern for them? All right, then finally, we're finally ready to write an offer. But here's the thing about offer letters. They should never, ever, ever contain a surprise, ever. Can you just imagine, put yourself in a candidate's shoes. You applied to a job, you're really excited, you've been through this whole long interview process, you've kind of bared your soul, and you're ready, you're so excited, you get the offer letter, you open up the offer letter, and they're offering you $10,000 less than what you had in your mind that you were going to get. Can you imagine how that feels? And then you have to go back and negotiate and come to an agreement, and you finally get the job, but that level of excitement has been diminished just a little bit. You can solve that by sitting down with your candidate face-to-face and go through the offer letter and say, this is what I'm thinking, this is why, this is how I'm going to get you to your financial goal. And then if they give you that look like, really? You can address it head on and have a really honest conversation about it. And that way, when they get their offer, it's just a matter of signing on the dotted line. The other reason this is so important is your top candidates are evaluating other jobs. And the last thing you want to do is send out an offer letter, cross your fingers, and hope that they accept yours. So always discuss offer letter terms in person and iron out the details before they walk out the door if you know you're going to hire them. Okay, so we covered a lot of ground today. Were there any ahas? Anything that you learned that you're going to apply to your process? Does anybody want to share what their ahas?
Apparently I need this. Using a better disc. We just used the freebie online, so that was an eye-opener. Thank you.
Good, all right. Anything else?
That was fantastic. We were just saying we got so much out of it, so many things we thought we were doing right, and so many steps we were missing. So I think just for Melanie and I, we were just saying being really clear and having a longer conversation, taking longer to go through each of the steps. It was really a great presentation.
Great, thank you. Okay, thanks guys.